EVs may soon be dropping rather dramatically in price because the government is going to be subsidizing the construction of battery packs for them. This is no joke, and I haven't seen anybody else really talking about this. So welcome back to All Cars Y'all. I am John, and this is a portion of the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, which I and others have spent a lot of time talking about the direct-to-consumer portion of it, that $7,500 we may or may not get back on it, and the ranking of whether it's a car, an SUV, and whether the minerals come from America and things like that. But there's another component of it that hasn't really been talked about. And I admit I stumbled across it because of an article in Car and Driver. It's called 45X, and it actually gives subsidies to the manufacturers. This could really dramatically affect the price of EVs, but I don't think it actually will. So here's the background on it. Obviously, part of the IRA is that they want to move manufacturing to America, protect our industry. And most of the interest has been focused on the consumer-facing rebates, tax rebates that are coming. But there's a portion of it behind the scenes affecting the manufacturers. And the IRA is a huge document. I think the one I read was 234 pages. I'll provide a link to the PDF before if you really want to read it for yourself. But the portion we're interested in is called 45X. And while the IRA covers photovoltaic cells and, I don't know, the distribution of biodiesel, whatever it happens to be, the fact is that we all focus on the EV portion of it. And for this EV portion of it, they're going to give subsidies to the manufacturers per kilowatt hour for the battery cells and battery packs they produce. So here's how it breaks down. That you have to meet certain qualifications, the manufacturers do, but if they meet those qualifications, they will pay $35 per cell or an extra $10 per pack. So $45 per kilowatt hour per pack for battery manufacturers for these EVs or other clean energy uses. So $45 per kilowatt hour. Now, 10, 12, 14 years ago, lithium ion was $1,000 a kilowatt hour. The goal is to get to 100. And right now, according to averages I've seen, we're sitting about $132 per kilowatt hour. Recent studies have shown that we're probably going to be able to break below 100. And maybe Tesla's sitting at 100, but we're average 132. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that $45 is about 1/3 of the cost at $132 per kilowatt hour. So the federal government is going to be subsidizing manufacturers about 1/3 the cost of the battery pack, the largest individual cost in their cars. And the thought being that that's going to be passed on to consumers and help EV adoption. But I don't actually think that's going to be how it works out. This is really good in concept, and this is not a political channel. I don't want to hear that below. This is not about should the government do it or shouldn't do it. It is law now, so let's talk about what exists. And I don't think that's the way it's actually going to work. So on the one hand, I think that there are brands or manufacturers that are going to want to use that to lower the price of their cars, to increase demand and increase the production at their facilities, increase the usage of their facilities. But there's also manufacturers like Tesla. They have no shortage of demand. They don't need it. Now, they did recently reduce their price. I did a whole video on that. And I don't wonder if this wasn't part of the calculus that brought them to that decision. Because they can increase demand by reducing their price, but preserve their profit margin by taking money over here as a subsidy from the federal government. Smart guys over there. So overall, I think individual brands or individual models will see a reduction in price. In fact, I would not be surprised to see GM reduced the price again of the Chevy Bolt. While it's a competitive entry with competitive range, it does have an older architecture that is very, very slow to recharge. And I think that's going to become increasingly noticeable to buyers. So reducing the price to keep it as a price leader, to gain interest, they can use this subsidy for that, assuming the battery meets all the other requirements, right, for manufacturing. But let's look at the horizon here, because this subsidy has essentially a 10-year horizon that sunsets in the last 2 to 4 years. It takes about 1 to 2 years to build a factory and start production. So if you wanted to take advantage of this and say, we're going to build a new battery factory, it's going to be about 2 years before that takes effect, right? But if you wanted to start a new lithium mine, you're talking about a multi-year horizon before that mine gets into play. I mean, after you start the design, apply for the permits, deal with the public reaction, deal with the protests, finally get the permits and start it and get lithium actually flowing out of it, you're talking about a multi-year process to get to that point. And right now, what we've got with the price of EV batteries is they've actually been ticking up slightly. So while supply and demand and capitalism are working to drive the price down, the fact is that increasing demand and efforts like by our government, but efforts in China and Europe and the United States to drive up demand is restricting the supply and slightly increasing the price of the battery packs. So this taking effect right now will only increase the demand while the supply will still be constricted for 5, maybe 10-year period. So I don't see a lot of manufacturers taking massive advantage of this. If we use a 100 kilowatt hour battery, and that's pretty large, but I could do the math in my head off of this, that they're going to get a $4,500 rebate, they could easily pass on $3,000 to the customer. But they may not want to because of these other effects, these other issues that they're trying to look at. But where I see it is about 2 years in taking effect. I think we're going to see increasing lithium supply, increasing battery supply, increasing demand, and an increasing number of models. But also, so by about 2025 or so, we're going to start seeing a move to other battery chemistries. Now, they are researching other chemistries right now to reduce the impact of lithium mining and things like that. And we're going to see a move to solid-state batteries. Toyota and Nissan have both talked about solid-state batteries, and they're about that 2025, 2026 horizon right now. Well, this legislation doesn't specify lithium ion. It specifies battery cell and battery pack. So any new technology will be overly expensive until you start to build up the supply and drop that price. This will help lower the price, making newer, more advanced, less destructive mixtures competitive with lithium ion. So I don't see this with a world where EV adoption is increasing. Right now we're about 6% here in the US. And a restriction on lithium supply that takes multiple years to address. I don't see it really affecting necessarily the price of EVs right now. But I do down the road see it affecting the price of EVs with newer technologies, keeping them, quote, affordable relative to lithium ion. I think that's really where the benefit's going to be, except for very specific models that manufacturers decide to pour their subsidy into to increase demand. But it's really interesting because nobody else is really talking about this space. Thanks for being here, guys. Let me know your thoughts below.